The masterminds of the most deadly and destructive attack on American soil will finally meet the full force of this country's justice system.
These were extraordinary crimes, and so we will seek maximum penalties.
But for the GOP, the extraordinary crimes of 9/11 are cause for extraordinary fear, as the party of no turns into the party of no confidence in the Constitution. Good evening from New York. I'm Lawrence O'Donnell. Keith Olbermann has the night off. Under the federal rules of criminal procedure, defendants are tried in the federal district where the offense was committed. In 1995 and 1996, federal prosecutors won convictions in the Southern District of New York against the conspirators responsible for the first World Trade Center bombing. Our fifth story on the countdown: they've done it before, they'll do it again. The Obama administration announced today that it will bring self-proclaimed mastermind behind the 9/11 attacks, as well as 4 others, to New York to face trial for the terror attacks. Of the 3,000 people killed that day, more than 2,700 of them died when terrorists crashed 2 hijacked airliners into the World Trade Center towers. More than 8 years later, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed will face justice for his role in planning the attacks, along with 4 other Guantanamo Bay detainees. The Attorney General announced the decision.
After 8 years of delay, those allegedly responsible for the attacks of September the 11th will finally face justice. They will be brought to New York, to answer for their alleged crimes in a courthouse just blocks away from where the Twin Towers once stood. I would not have authorized the prosecution of these cases unless I was confident that our outcome would be a successful one.
Mr. Holder also asked that Washington leave the politics out of it when considering the decision. No such luck. His predecessor as Attorney General, Michael Mukasey, who also presided as judge at the first World Trade Center bombing trial, called the decision unwise, adding that the Obama administration has returned to the September 10 justice model. Senator Joe Lieberman finds it inconceivable that we would bring these alleged terrorists back to New York for trial. Minority Leader Boehner said he's worried that the men could be found not guilty due to some legal technicality just blocks from ground zero. While Rush Limbaugh apparently doesn't like that the previous administration's misdeeds might be exposed.
What's going to end up on trial here, and this is the insidious part, what's going to end up on trial here is the United States, the CIA, our interrogation techniques. All of this is being done to satisfy the rabid, radical far left that hates this country, that hates George W. Bush, that hates the U.S. military. They want this show in New York. They want the United States on trial. Your country is going to be on trial, and your country will likely be found guilty.
Lots to talk about tonight with constitutional law expert Jonathan Turley, a law professor at George Washington University. Good evening, Professor.
Hi, Lawrence.
Senator Lieberman, for one, is talking as if this sort of thing has never happened. He finds it, in his words, inconceivable that we would bring these terrorists back to the scene of the crime. What is the relevant precedent here?
Well, I'm not too sure what Senator Lieberman is referring to. What George Bush did was inconceivable for most people around this world. When the United States became openly hypocritical, we changed our rules to try to force outcomes. You know, he created these tribunals of his designed to guarantee convictions, to avoid due process. And what we're returning to is the rule of law. And that has a great deal of resonance around the world. People want an alternative to the men we are about to try. But we weren't offering an alternative. We were offering a very hypocritical position. And by the way, George Bush sent one person connected with 9/11, at least that's what they said at the time, to a federal court for trial, Zacharias Moussaoui. The problem is that there was a lack of principle and consistency where he also sent most others to no trial at all and to be held without access for a while for counsel and courts.
Now, Jonathan, I'm not a defense lawyer. I just play one on TV. But if I'm representing Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the one place I don't want to go to trial is the scene of the crime, is New York, New York, where they have successfully carried out this kind of prosecution before, and where obviously there is very, very intense feeling about 9/11 in the jury pool. Isn't my first motion as their defense lawyers to try to get a change of venue to somewhere else?
You bet. I do handle terrorism cases, and the first thing I would do is take the clip you just played, put it into a transcript, and say attaches a motion for venue change, because what the Attorney General just said was the perfect case for a venue change. He said, I'm intentionally putting this a few blocks away from the attack in the city that was most directly affected by these attacks. And the thing you have to worry about, of course, is that you get a venue change to Virginia, a few blocks from the Pentagon. But there's a very good argument to be made that it'll be hard to get a jury pool that will be fair just a few blocks from this horrific scene.
Aren't some of these critics succumbing to their fear of the terrorists? I mean, aren't they now essentially afraid to fight the terrorists using our own rules, the things that we believe in, the things we've successfully relied on as a society for a couple of hundred years?
That's what's most distressing. You know, this borders on constitutional defamation. These people saying that our laws cannot stand up to the task. You know, this country has gone through crises that would have reduced other systems to a fine pumice. We've lasted. Our Constitution may not be as poetic as some, but it's designed to last, and it has done that. I can't understand why there's this crisis of faith, and that's what these senators are showing, that they're showing a crisis of faith in the Constitution, and I don't know why, because the Constitution has been not the danger, not the risk to our liberties, it's been the thing that preserved it. And what is happening today is one of the most significant events in fighting terrorism. We have finally taken the high ground. Not entirely. I mean, I'm distressed that Attorney General Holder in the same press conference said, and by the way, we're sending 5 others to military commission. It seemed to me that he succeeded to snatch hypocrisy out of the jaws of principle.
And Jonathan, he was asked what would happen if these defendants were found not guilty or if they somehow got out on a procedural technicality. And he refused to answer that question. It seemed to me he left open the possibility that they could make some extrajudicial move if the trial didn't go the prosecution's way.
Well, I hope that's not the case, because I remember seeing the same part of the press conference, and I had the same reaction that you did. And that plays into this fact that he's playing the Caesar-like role of sending some to the commission, some to the courts. But I hope at the end of the day we will trust our legal system and our Constitution and have faith in the thing that defines us as a country.
Law professor Jonathan Turley of George Washington University, many thanks for your time tonight.
Thanks, Lawrence.
For more on the reaction, let's turn now to Kristen Breitweiser, whose husband Ronald was killed in New York on September 11th. She is the author of Wake Up Call, The Political Education of a 9/11 Widow. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Some of the victims' families of 9/11 have indicated that they're not pleased with this move to New York. How do you react to this?
I think those families seem to be indicating a sense of anger or fear. And I think really to be feeling those types of things, it doesn't fit my personality. I think that that's bowing to the terrorists. I think there is no better place than the Southern District of New York to have these prosecutions heard. I think it's an open forum, and I think it speaks to the world that we are, in fact, a nation of laws. And frankly, I think after 8 years of the Bush administration, we've got a lot of work in restoring our legitimacy to the rest of the world, that we are indeed a just nation that follows the rule of law.
We talk about closure in things like this. I can't imagine what closure could mean to you or other victims' families of 9/11. But do you imagine there being some sense of closure in this kind of trial?
I think obviously there will be some modicum of closure, because we're going to see that people will be held accountable. To date, we have not successfully prosecuted a terrorist related to 9/11. Moussaoui pled out, so that was not a successful prosecution. It was a settlement. And as Khalid Sheikh Mohammed actually made a self-admission on Al Jazeera that he did the 9/11 attacks, he planned the 9/11 attacks, so I'm quite confident that that will end in a successful prosecution.
Now, the Attorney General indicated that this would, like all trials, be open to the public, except for certain moments where there might be some classified material. You've known this for less than a day, that this is going to happen. Have you feelings about whether you would like to be in that courtroom?
Obviously, I'd like to be in the courtroom. I'm one of the 9/11 widows who fought for the 9/11 Commission solely so that we could have access to information, transparency, accountability. And I think that's one of the benefits of having a open Article III federal court as opposed to a military tribunal. Military tribunals shroud everything in secrecy. There is no jury. There is no appeals process. And these are horrible people. They committed a crime. But much like the trials in Nuremberg, where we had individuals who were responsible for the death of millions of people, this country is a country who stands on the principle of being a nation of laws, and we are more than adequately prepared to do this.
How do you feel about the risk of a trial? The procedural elements of the trial could lead to some form of dismissal or inability to use certain evidence because the Bush administration used torture in some of these cases, and some of the information might then be ruled out because of the use of torture. There's also the possibility of not clearing the beyond a reasonable doubt proof standard. How do you feel about the possibility of the outcome of this trial being risky and unsatisfactory?
Listen, obviously it's an outrage that if you want to talk about this turning into a circus, it's not going to turn into a circus because of the abuses of our judicial system going forward from now on. What did turn this process into a circus was the Bush administration's torture policies, which were half-baked, and as a result of that, many of the 9/11 families will not see the sort of prosecution, swift prosecution that we should have seen several years back.
Kristen Breitweiser, author of Wake Up Call, The Political Education of a 9/11 Widow, cannot thank you enough for coming in here tonight.
Thank you.